For folks watching and listening, this is the Reimagine Public Safety Debate for Black Portland, hosted by Imagine Black and produced by Labs. We're going to go into our final long-form question, and then we'll get some rapid fire in there. So this is also one of those long ones for folks listening and watching, so bear with me. Let's get into it. In the recent public meeting on violence prevention, City of Portland's evaluation specialist, Ryan D'Ambrosio, hopefully I said that right, reported that gun violence in Portland has actually dropped by 22% since August of 2023. Ryan also highlighted that 38% reduction in Black gun violence victims have also over the past year. So a 38% reduction in Black gun violence victims over the past year. The city is attributing the overall decline in shootings to the success of gun violence prevention programs that received funding from both the City of Portland and statewide allocations of federal pandemic funds. Operating in partnership with a nonprofit POIC, the city's Office of Violence Prevention has implemented a program called Healing Hurt People, recommend you take a look at it, that offers counseling and outreach to community members that are at risk of gun violence, including those who are victims of gun violence. My question, and we'll pass it to you first, is how will you prioritize the continued funding and success of community-centered programs that have proven to prevent crime?
Yeah, so I really just want to celebrate this reduction for a moment. That's a big change for our city and is really lovely. So I'm really happy to hear that. And I do think that we need these gun prevention programs and really need to be serious about guns are terrifying. I think about it in terms, honestly, of AI. AI is an easy tool that you can say, in the right hands, it could do good, right? In the wrong hands, it could do bad. But guns are only good for one thing. You can't really use a gun in a good way. So I really think that in terms of gun prevention, we need to be approaching it from that way. Is the only thing that these guns are good for is violence. And so, yes, I love that these community programs exist. And I watched a council meeting. It was actually where we were all testifying on behalf of the Portland Street Response, but where Rose City Self-Defense was there and saying that their budget was at risk of being cut. And what I'm seeing is sort of this rubber band effect of the city has more than it knew what to do with the money for a period of time, and so it created all of these awesome community programs. And then the second that, more wealthy people are moving out of the city and there's maybe not as much money, we're gonna cut all those community programs. But it's normal for money to fluctuate in this way. And so we really need to be paying attention to the feast and famine of the city's budget and say, okay, this is what we can do sustainably. So we're not creating programs that are super successful and then saying, oh, just kidding, we have to cut you. So I really think that there's just a measure of how do we stabilize as a city and fund these programs and keep them funded and create really long-term programs that are successful in this way, so that we're not doing this rubber band effect.
Yeah, thank you for that. Same question. How will you prioritize the continued funding and success of community-centered programs that have proven to prevent crime? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, Andrew's making it easy for me. You brought up this rubber band kind of oscillating effect. And so I'm not an expert on community-centered programs for policing. I'm not, but I am on economics. And one of the things that I have noticed in this race, in this city over the last year and a half, 2 years maybe, is this narrative that that we've got these statistics that we're playing a little fast and loose with, right? So I'm glad that you started off by quoting that there has been a reduction in this stuff. But I think there are some camps who would say the reduction is because of more patrol officers or that sort of thing. Whereas it's tied to these investments in this community. It's also tied to the fact that we've recovered from a COVID pandemic to a certain degree, and there is a natural ebb and flow there. But if a program is worth doing, it should not depend upon the cyclicality of the economy. You fund that, just like schools, just like preschool for all, right? And there's a parallel there because right now there's the same narrative, and you kind of alluded to this, that there's this idea that all the wealthy people are leaving, and they're just being replaced by poor people, and it almost sounds like great replacement theory to me. Imagine that. I think there's a rhetorical value in that, But that statistic is also not true. I mean, yes, there are some rich people leaving, but the income distribution in our city, in our county, is so out of skew that even a couple rich people leaving is enough to pull up the average of those people leaving. And so what is true is that income inequality continues to grow in this city, and the share of households who make over $200,000 a year is growing. So our tax base is not going away. It's staying right here. And so we just need to make sure that so how will I prioritize it? Like, I can stand up and I can talk to that, right? And I can say that this is not the data, right? And we should stay the course and fund these programs.
Thank you. So before we move on to the rapid fire, because we have been getting into it, and I'm looking at my clock and I was like, Joy, what are you doing? We got to move through this. Any final thoughts for me to the rapid question, particularly about prioritizing these community center programs?
Yeah, I really appreciate what you brought in about the economic factors of people moving out, and that's really useful information to be using. But I also just want to say that like we need to, as a city, determine our values and not change those values based on how it might change the wealth of our city. I think we need to be in our own integrity about that and not change based on where the money flows.
Thank you. Any last thoughts as well?
Yeah, I'm also going to borrow from your insights earlier. You talked about permaculture. So an analogy I like to think about is like, when we are designing programs and funding things, we're cultivating a garden, right? We are cultivating resources. Resources are not just things that fall out of the sky that we mine out of the earth. They are things that we build. They are institutions. And if you want them to be something that flourishes and provides benefits for generations, you got to garden. You got to cultivate. And so that means like giving resources to things that need them, and saying, what, that over there, you don't need that anymore. Too much fertilizer. Let's take it over here. And so it's an active management of like sort of tending your garden in the city.
Thank you. For those listening and watching, this is the Reimagine Public Safety Debate, hosted by Imagine Black and produced by Lab.